Rain drummed on the roof of the old patrol car as Detective Malachi Parrish parked near 1234 East Jefferson Street. The gray October sky hung over Detroit's industrial district like a dirty sheet, and the peeling facades of the houses looked even more dreary in the dim light of the cloudy day. Parrish turned off the engine and sat silently for a few seconds, staring at the two-story house with its peeling blue paint and crooked porch. In his 25 years on the force, he had seen enough cases like this: missing wives, missing husbands, family dramas that ended either in a happy reunion or something much more sinister. Today's call seemed standard. A 48-year-old man had reported his wife missing, but something in the dispatcher's voice made Parrish wary. The detective got out of the car, adjusted his raincoat collar, and headed for the entrance. The door opened before he had a chance to knock. Standing on the threshold was a tall, black man with broad shoulders and calloused hands. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, and his face showed a mixture of anxiety and despair. "Are you a detective?" the man asked, without waiting for an introduction. "Detective Malachi Parrish, Detroit Police Department," Parrish said, showing his badge. "Are you Keanu Bolton?" "Yes, that's me. Please come in. Thank you for coming so quickly." The interior of the house was modestly furnished but clean and well kept. A worn, coffee-colored sofa stood in front of an old television, and family photos in simple frames hung on the walls. Parrish immediately noticed that many of the photos featured an attractive middle-aged woman with short hair and a warm smile. Clearly, the missing Zahara Bolton. "Tell me everything from the beginning," Parrish said, sitting down on the edge of the sofa and taking out his notebook. "When was the last time you saw your wife?" Keanu sank into the chair opposite, nervously rubbing his palms against his jeans. "The day before yesterday morning on Wednesday. I left for work as usual, around 7 in the morning. Zahara was still asleep. When I came home in the evening, she was gone. At first I thought she was late from work or had gone to a friend's house, but what? She's not answering her phone. It just goes straight to voicemail. And most importantly..." Keanu fell silent, as if trying to decide whether to continue. "What's the main thing, Mr. Bolton?" "The money is gone. All the money I've saved for 8 years. Parrish looked up from his notebook. "How much money?" $47,000 in cash. Keanu's voice trembled. "I was putting it in a hiding place, getting ready to move to Georgia. I have a job offer there, a good place. Zahara and I were planning to start a new life. Show me this hiding place." Keanu led the detective into the bedroom. The room was small, with a double bed and an old chest of drawers. Bolton walked over to the corner where a massive safe, the size of a microwave, stood. "Here," he said, dialing the combination on the electronic lock. The safe opened, revealing emptiness. "There used to be stacks of bills here, neatly tied with rubber bands. I checked them every week." Parrish examined the safe carefully. There were no signs of tampering, and the lock worked properly. "Who else knew the combination?" "Only Zahara. I gave it to her in case of an emergency." "Did she know about your plans to move?" Keanu hesitated before answering. "Yes, she did. We talked about it." Talked or argued? Now the pause lasted even longer. Parrish could see Bolton struggling with himself, deciding how much truth to reveal. "Lately, we weren't getting along very well," Keanu finally admitted. "Zahara didn't want to move. She said her whole life was here, her job, her friends, and I was tired of this city, of this life. I wanted a change." "How often did you argue?" "Almost every day for the last few months. She accused me of making decisions without her, of not taking her opinion into account. And maybe I was too stubborn." Parrish wrote down the main points and closed his notebook. "I need to talk to your neighbors, your wife's colleagues. Check the surveillance footage. Do you have a recent photo of Zahara?" Keanu brought a photo from the living room table. Zahara was smiling at the camera, standing near their house. The photo had been taken that summer, and the woman looked happy and carefree. "Where does your wife work?" "At Fresh Mart, the grocery store on Woodward Avenue. She's been a cashier there for 5 years." The detective went outside and headed for the neighboring house. An elderly woman opened the door. It was Mrs. Washington, who had lived next door to the Boltons for over 10 years. "Oh, detective, I'm so worried about Zahara," she said, inviting him into her small hallway. Such a nice girl, always says hello, helps carry bags. Have you seen her in the last few days? Tuesday evening, I think. She was going out to the mailbox. She looked upset. Upset how? Well, she wasn't crying, but her face was serious, troubled. They've been arguing a lot lately, her and Keanu. The walls are thin, you can hear things. What were they arguing about? Something about moving, about money. Keanu was yelling that he was tired of living in poverty, that he wanted to try his luck somewhere else. And Zahara said she wasn't going anywhere, that this was her home. Parrish questioned several more neighbors. The picture was similar. A married couple who had previously lived quietly, but had begun arguing more frequently and loudly in recent months. Several people confirmed that they had seen Zakar near the house on Tuesday evening, but no one had seen her since. The next stop was the Fresh Mart store. The manager, a heavy-set woman named Sharon, greeted the detective with concern. Zahara didn't come to work yesterday or today, she said. This isn't like her at all. She's very responsible and has never missed a day of work without warning in 5 years. How has she been acting lately? A little distracted, I guess. Sometimes she would space out while working with customers. She said she had problems at home but didn't go into details. Did she mention any plans to leave town? Sharon shook her head. On the contrary, she recently asked about the possibility of moving to a higher position. She said she wanted to earn more and become more independent. This information made Parrish think. If Zahara was planning a career advancement at her current job, why would she need to disappear with her husband's money? Returning to the Boltons' house, the detective found Keanu sitting on the porch despite the drizzling rain. The man was smoking, nervously inhaling and exhaling smoke into the gray sky. Mr. Bolton, your wife was recently interested in a promotion at work. Did you know about that? Keanu looked up in surprise. A promotion? No, she didn't say anything to me. Although, we haven't talked much lately. We've just been arguing. Tell me more about your plans to move. Was it your decision or did you discuss it together? At first it was just a dream, Keanu said, stubbing out his cigarette. I've been working at a car repair shop for 15 years and I'm tired of the same routine. Then a friend from Atlanta offered me a partnership to open my own shop. Good money, good prospects. I started saving and told Zach. How did she react? At first, she seemed supportive. But the closer the move got, the more she resisted. She said I was selfish and only thought about myself. Parrish returned to his car and contacted the station via radio. He needed to check Zakara's bank accounts, surveillance camera footage in the area, and find out if she had bought bus or plane tickets. It was standard procedure for a missing person case, but something told the detective that this case was far from standard. That evening, back at the station, Parrish laid out all the information he had gathered on the table. A photo of a smiling Zahara, statements from neighbors and colleagues, information about family conflicts. $47,000 was a serious amount of money for a working family, saved up over 8 years. Enough to start a new life in another state, or to disappear forever. The detective rubbed his tired eyes. Tomorrow he would have to check the surveillance camera footage, talk to the bank and possibly issue an official search warrant. But even now, he felt that the story of Keanu Bolton was far from the whole truth. Too many inconsistencies, too many unanswered questions. Parrish closed the case file and glanced at his watch. It was 10:30 in the evening. The rain outside had intensified, the drops tapping on the window like the fingers of a nervous person on a table. Somewhere in this city, either Zahara Bolton was starting a new life with her husband's stolen money, or something much more serious had happened to her. And the detective was going to find out exactly what that was. Friday morning greeted Detective Parrish with a gray sky and a cold wind blowing withered leaves through the streets. He arrived at the station early before 7 in the morning to begin checking Zahara Bolton's bank records. A folder with preliminary data collected by the night shift was already on his desk. The bank statements revealed an interesting pattern. Over the past 2 weeks, Zahara had withdrawn $3,800 from her personal account, almost all of her savings. The withdrawals had been made in installments. First $1,000 on October 10th, then $1,500 on the 14th, and the last $1,300 on the 16th, the day before she disappeared. Parrish studied the printouts carefully. All transactions were made at a bank branch on Grand River Avenue, not far from the Boltons' home. The money was withdrawn during the day, when Zahara should have been at work. This meant that she had either asked for time off or left during her lunch break. The detective called the bank and arranged a meeting with the manager. Mr. Davis, an elderly man in a strict suit, met him in his office and provided additional information. "Mrs. Bolton has been a customer of ours for 7 years," said the banker, leafing through the documents. "Very punctual, never had any problems with payments. But in recent weeks she has been coming in to withdraw money quite often. Did she explain what she needed the cash for?" "No, but she seemed tense, nervous, in a hurry. She was usually very friendly, but she barely said hello. Do you remember what she looked like the last time she was here?" Davis thought for a moment. "That was on the 16th, Tuesday. She came in around noon and withdrew $1,300. She was dressed as usual, but her face was serious, focused. She asked if she could close her account, but I explained that we needed additional documentation for that." After the bank, Parrish headed to the Eastland Mall, where, according to patrol reports, Zahara's car had been found. The old red Honda Civic was parked at the far end of the lot, next to some dumpsters. The car was locked, but the detective got permission to look inside. Opening the door, Parrish immediately noticed signs of disorder. The driver's seat was pushed back further than usual, and the rearview mirror was turned at an odd angle. The contents of the glove compartment were scattered on the floor: napkins, pens, mint candies. In the front seat, he found a long black hair and a small stain that could have been blood. The most important find was on the back of the driver's seat. 3 long scratches on the leather upholstery, as if someone had tried to grab something with their claws or fingernails. Parrish called in forensic experts to examine the car in detail. While the experts were working on the car, the detective questioned the shopping center security guards. One of them, a young man named Marcus, remembered the red Honda. "It's been here for 3 days, maybe 4, the security guard said. "I walked past it several times and thought maybe someone had abandoned it. I was about to call a tow truck." "Did you see who parked it?" "No, unfortunately. My shift starts at 6 in the evening, and the car was already here when I arrived on Wednesday." Wednesday was the day Zahara disappeared. It turned out that her car was in the shopping center parking lot on the same day she went missing from her home. Parrish returned to the station, where the results of the surveillance camera check were already waiting for him. A technician, a young woman named Carol, laid out several printed frames on the table. "This is what we found," she said, pointing to the black and white images. "The camera on Jefferson Street captured a red Honda on Wednesday around 2 p.m. The car was heading toward the city center. The blurry image did indeed show a familiar car. A woman was behind the wheel, but her face was impossible to make out due to the poor quality of the recording." "Now this is more interesting," Carol said, showing the next frame. "This is a camera at the shopping center. The same car arrives at the parking lot at 2:35. Now look here." A video appeared on the computer screen. A red Honda drove into the shopping center parking lot, but it was moving strangely, jerking as if the driver couldn't decide where to go. The car slowed down several times, then turned sharply and finally stopped in the far corner of the parking lot. "See those maneuvers?" Carol asked. "The person either doesn't know this place well or is under stress." A woman got out of the car. Her figure, height, and clothing matched the description of Zahara Bolton. She quickly locked the car and headed for the shopping center, but then the video cut off. The camera only captured the parking lot, not the main entrance. Parrish asked to check the mall's internal camera footage, but the results were disappointing. Due to technical problems, the surveillance system had been intermittent that day, and the Wednesday footage was corrupted. The detective decided to personally visit the stores in the mall. He showed Zahara's photo to salespeople, security guards, and visitors, but no one remembered a woman who could have been there on Wednesday afternoon. In the cafeteria on the second floor, he was stopped by an elderly waitress. "This woman was here," she said, looking closely at the photo. "On Wednesday, I remember clearly. She ordered coffee but hardly drank it. She sat there for about 15 minutes, staring at her phone the whole time." "Was she alone?" "Yes, alone. She looked worried, nervous. She got up several times as if she was about to leave, then sat back down." "Did you see where she went?" "Toward the exit, but not the main one. She headed for the side exit that leads to the bus stop." This was important information. The side exit of the shopping center was indeed located next to the intercity bus stop. Parrish immediately went there and questioned the drivers and dispatchers. A middle-aged woman named Gloria was working at the bus ticket office. She studied Zahara's photo carefully. "I can't say for sure," the cashier admitted. "There were a lot of passengers on Wednesday, and people were constantly coming in with questions about the schedule. But if she did buy a ticket, it was cash. We don't have a record of that name in our database." Parrish felt the investigation was reaching a dead end. Zakhar had disappeared on Wednesday afternoon, leaving her car in the shopping center parking lot. She could have taken a bus and gone anywhere, met someone, or simply disappeared into the crowd of the big city. But the forensic team had finished examining the car, and their report changed the whole picture. The stain on the front seat was indeed blood, human blood, type A positive. The scratches on the upholstery had been made by fingernails, under which the experts found particles of skin. Most importantly, a torn button from a woman's blouse was found in the trunk. "These are definitely signs of a struggle," explained Senior Detective Parrish. "Someone resisted, tried to defend themselves. The amount of blood is small, but enough to indicate trauma." That evening, the detective returned to the Boltons' home. Keanu met him at the door with hope in his eyes, but Parrish's expression made it clear that the news was not good. "We found your wife's car," the detective said, "at the Eastland Shopping Center. There are signs of a struggle in the car." Keanu paled and sank into a chair. "Struggle? What does that mean?" "It means your wife may have been the victim of a crime. Mr. Bolton, I need to know everything. Did Zahara have any enemies? People who might have wanted to harm her?" No. Zahara was a good person. Everyone loved her. She never hurt anyone." "What about money? Who else knew about your savings?" Keanu was silent for a long time, thinking. "My best friend Azaria, he knew. We worked together, worked at the same car repair shop. Maybe Zahara told one of her friends, but I don't know who." Parrish wrote down Azaria's name and arranged to meet him tomorrow morning. The case was taking a completely different turn. What had started as a family dispute and a possible escape by a wife with her husband's money now looked like a serious crime. Late in the evening, as he was about to go home, the detective received a call from Patrol Officer Johnson. "Detective Parrish, we found a woman's purse in a ditch on 8th Mile Road," the patrolman reported. "The documents are in the name of Zahara Bolton." Parrish immediately drove to the scene. The purse was lying in a roadside ditch, half hidden by fallen leaves. It was a medium-sized brown leather bag, worn from long use. Inside were Zahara's driver's license, credit cards, lipstick, house keys, and a few other items that women typically carry with them. But there was no money in the purse, not a single dollar. The detective carefully examined the scene. 8th Mile Road ran through an industrial area with few residential buildings and virtually no traffic at night. It was the perfect place to dispose of evidence. The purse was wet from the rain, but not enough to have been lying there for several days. Most likely, it had been discarded recently, perhaps even today. Parrish called in forensic experts to examine the purse and thoroughly investigate the scene. While the experts worked, he stood on the side of the road and tried to piece together the sequence of events. Zahara disappeared on Wednesday, leaving her car at the mall. There were signs of a struggle in the car, and her purse was found 2 days later in an industrial area 15 miles from the mall. $47,000 was missing from the safe in her home, plus nearly $4,000 she had withdrawn from her bank account. Someone knew about the money. Someone met Zahara on Wednesday at the mall or nearby. There was a struggle. The woman was injured, and then she disappeared with the money. But where is she now? And most importantly, is she still alive? Saturday began with a thick fog enveloping Detroit in a gray shroud. Detective Parrish arrived at Speedy Fix Auto Repair Shop on Corcoran Street before it opened, but saw that the lights were already on in one of the bays. Working on an old pickup truck, he spotted Azaria Fletcher, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with a graying beard and alert brown eyes. "Mr. Fletcher? Detective Parrish, Detroit Police, I need to talk to you about Keanu and Zach Bolton." Azaria straightened up, wiping his hands on a dirty rag. "I heard Zahara is missing. That's terrible. Keanu called yesterday and said the police were looking for her." "Have you known the Bolton family for a long time?" "I've been working with Keanu for 12 years, ever since he came here as a mechanic. He's a good man with golden hands. I've known Zahara for about 8 years since they got married." Fletcher suggested they go into a small office behind the workshop where they could talk quietly. The room was cramped, cluttered with folders and spare parts, but it was quiet and free from the noise of the engines. "Tell me about their marriage," Parrish asked, settling into the only empty chair. Azaria sighed heavily. "They used to be happy, at least they seemed to be. Zahara often came here, brought Keanu lunch, and they joked and laughed, but in the last year something changed." "What exactly?" "Keanu started talking about moving, about a new life. He was tired of this city, of the hopelessness. He has a really good offer there in Atlanta, a partnership in a new workshop, but Zahara was categorically against it." "Did she explain why?" Fletcher hesitated, as if considering whether to continue. "Detective, I'm going to tell you what I know, but please understand, he's my best friend. I don't want to hurt him. Mr. Fletcher, we're talking about a possible crime. Zahara Bolton may be in danger." "All right. The thing is, Zahara didn't just not want to go to Georgia. She was planning to leave Keanu." Those words made Parrish sit up straight in his chair. "How do you know that?" "About 3 months ago, she came here when Keanu wasn't here. She said she couldn't live with him anymore, that they had grown apart. She asked if I knew how much money he had saved for the move." "And what did you say?" I told her the truth. Keanu trusted me, told me about his plans. $47,000 is the result of 8 years of saving. Every dollar counted. He put money aside from every paycheck, denied himself everything." "How did Zahara react?" "She was surprised that it was such a large amount. She said she didn't know how much he had saved. And then she said something strange." "What exactly?" Azaria rubbed his forehead, trying to remember. "She said, maybe that money will be enough to start a new life, just not in Georgia and not with Keanu." Parrish wrote down every word. The picture was becoming clearer, but at the same time more confusing. Zahara knew about the money and was planning to divorce him. But did that mean she had really run away with her husband's savings? Did Keanu know about his wife's plans? I don't think so. He kept talking about moving in together, making plans for their future. Zahara didn't tell him directly, but I saw the way she looked at him. Without love, with a kind of indifference. Does Keanu have someone else? The question hung in the air. Azaria was clearly hesitating, struggling with himself. "Mr. Fletcher, this is very important. There is one girl," Azaria finally admitted. "Genesis Cole, a nurse at Henry Ford Hospital. They've been dating for several months. Did Zahara know about this?" "I'm not sure. Keanu tried to be careful, but, it's hard to hide things like that completely." Parrish got Genesis Cole's address and phone number, thanked Fletcher for his candor, and headed to the hospital. On the way, he pondered the new information. The family triangle was becoming increasingly complicated. A husband with a mistress planning to move, a wife who knew about the money and was preparing for a divorce. A classic situation for a family drama that could end in tragedy. At the hospital, he was directed to the emergency room, where Genesis Cole was working. The young woman, about 28 years old, was attractive and slender, with short hair and intelligent eyes. She was just finishing her shift and agreed to talk in the hospital cafeteria. "Do you know why I'm here?" Parrish asked as they sat down at a table in the corner of the half-empty room. "I think it has something to do with Keanu," Genesis replied, nervously adjusting her hair. "He said his wife was missing. Tell me about your relationship with Mr. Bolton." Genesis lowered her eyes. "We've been seeing each other for 6 months. We met when he brought a friend here after an accident. I know it's wrong, he's married, but there's something between us." "Did he tell you about his marital problems?" "Yes, he said he and his wife live like roommates, that the love is long gone, that they want different things out of life." "Any plans to move?" "Here," Genesis hesitated. "He mentioned Georgia, said he wanted to start a new life there. I hoped he meant a life with me. Did you know about the money he was saving?" "What money?" Genesis looked genuinely surprised, but Parrish noticed how she clasped her hands together and how her voice trembled. $47,000 that Keanu had been saving for the move. No, he never mentioned any specific amounts, just that he was saving money for the future. The detective studied the young woman's face. Something about her behavior seemed unnatural. her overly controlled gestures, her evasive gaze, the tension in her voice. "Miss Cole, when was the last time you saw Keanu?" "Last Monday. We met at a cafe not far from here and talked about our relationship." "What exactly?" "I asked him if he was going to divorce his wife. He said it was complicated, that he needed time." "And on Wednesday? Did you see him on Wednesday?" "No, I worked late on Wednesday, double shift." Parrish wrote down this information and asked her to confirm her alibi with her colleagues. Genesis agreed, but he noticed her nervously biting her lip as she gave him their contact details. Leaving the hospital, the detective contacted the police station. The forensic team had finished analyzing Zahara's purse, and the results were disturbing. Bloodstains were found on the inside of the bag, the same blood type as in the car. In addition, fingerprints were found that did not belong to Zahara. "Whose fingerprints?" Parrish asked the expert. "We don't know yet. We're running them through the database, but we don't have any results yet. We also found fabric fibers caught on the bag's clasp, dark blue material, similar to denim. This evidence supported the theory of a struggle. Someone had fought with Zahara, touched her bag, possibly looking for something inside. Money? Documents? Or just trying to rob her?" Parrish decided to talk to Keanu again, armed with new information. He found the man at home, in the same chair where he had left him the day before. Keanu looked even worse, unshaven, with red eyes and rumpled clothes. "Mr. Bolton, I need to ask you some direct questions. Was your wife planning to divorce you?" Keanu raised his head, surprise flashing in his eyes. "Divorce? No, we never talked about divorce. Yes, we argued, but what about Genesis Cole? Were you going to tell me about her?" Now Keanu turned completely pale. Who told you?" "That's not important. What's important is that you withheld information in the investigation into your wife's disappearance." Keanu buried his face in his hands. "I didn't want to complicate things. It has nothing to do with Zahara's disappearance. Let me decide what's relevant to the case and what isn't. How long has your affair been going on?" 6 months. But it's not serious, it just happened." "Did Zahara know?" "I don't think so. At least she didn't say anything." "Did Genesis know about your savings?" Keanu was silent for a long time. "I may have mentioned that I was saving money, but I didn't give any details." The detective could see that the man was lying, or at least not telling the whole truth. There was too much left unsaid, too many coincidences. "Mr. Bolton, I have to warn you. We found blood in your wife's car and on her purse. We have every reason to believe that something serious has happened to her." Keanu looked up at him in horror. "Do you think she's dead?" "I think someone hurt her, and that someone knew about the money." That evening, Parrish sat in his office, laying out all the evidence and statements he had gathered on his desk. A family photo of Keanu and Zahara smiling, bank statements, photos of the car from the crime scene, expert reports. The picture was becoming increasingly grim. Zahara Bolton was planning a divorce and knew about her husband's savings. Keanu was cheating on his wife with a young nurse and hiding it from the police. On Wednesday, Zahara disappeared after meeting someone at a shopping mall. Blood was found in her car and purse. The detective was almost certain that Zahara was dead. All that remained was to find out who killed her and where the body was. The circle of suspects narrowed, but each of them had a motive and the means to commit the crime. Keanu could have killed his wife in a fit of jealousy or anger after learning of her plans to divorce him and take the money. Genesis could have eliminated her rival, dreaming of a future with her lover. Or maybe it was just a robbery, and the criminal knew about the large amount of cash. Tomorrow, the investigation would continue, checking Genesis's alibi and finding witnesses who might have seen Zahara on the last day of her life. But Parrish already felt that the answer was close. After 25 years as a detective, he had learned to trust his intuition, and his intuition told him that the killer was already within the scope of the investigation. Sunday morning brought an unexpected call. Detective Parrish had not yet fully awakened when his phone erupted with the sharp sound of a call. On the other end of the line was Sergeant McGregor from the station. "Detective, we have a body," he said without preamble. "A woman believed to be your missing Zahara Bolton, an abandoned warehouse on Livernois Avenue near the railroad tracks." Parrish got dressed in 5 minutes and sped through the deserted Sunday streets. The warehouse was located in an industrial area that had once been home to car factories, but now stood half-ruined, with rusting structures. It was the perfect place to hide a body. Almost no one ever came here. Forensic investigators, a medical examiner, and several patrol officers had already gathered at the warehouse. The old brick building with broken windows and a crooked roof looked like a set from a horror movie. It was here that a utility worker checking the pipes had stumbled upon the body. Zakara Bolton lay in the far corner of the main hall of the warehouse, partially hidden by old cardboard boxes and construction debris. She was wearing the same clothes Keanu had described, dark blue jeans and a white blouse, now stained with dirt and blood. Dr. Margaret Williams, the county's chief medical examiner, was already conducting a preliminary examination of the body. A woman in her 60s with gray hair and piercing eyes, she had worked with Parrish for many years and was known for her meticulousness. "What can you tell us, Doc?" the detective asked, moving closer. "Death was caused by traumatic brain injury," Williams replied without looking up from her work. "A blow to the left temple with a blunt object. Judging by the nature of the injuries, it was a heavy metal object with an uneven surface." "When did this happen?" "Preliminary estimate is 3 to 4 days ago. I'll be able to say more after the autopsy, but the time of death coincides with the day of her disappearance." Parrish carefully examined the scene where the body had been found. Zahara was lying in a natural position, as if she had simply been left there after she died. There were no signs that the body had been dragged or that anyone had tried to hide it more carefully. "It looks like the killer didn't plan the murder in advance," the detective mused aloud. "It was spontaneous, in a fit of rage or during an argument." Near the body, forensic experts found several important clues. A button torn from Zakara's blouse, which matched the one found in the trunk of her car. Bloodstains on the concrete floor leading from the entrance to where the body lay. And most importantly, shoe prints in the dust, size 37, women's shoes with a small heel. "Detective, look here," called the senior forensic scientist standing at the entrance to the warehouse. "There are tire tracks here. Someone parked right outside the door recently." Parrish examined the prints in the mud. The tread pattern was clear, and the tires looked relatively new. The forensic experts made casts for further analysis. After the body was taken to the morgue and the crime scene was processed, the detective returned to the station. The case was now officially a murder investigation, and there was little time to think. The killer could try to escape or destroy evidence. Parrish laid out a timeline of events on the table. Wednesday, October 12th, Zakara withdraws the last of her money from her bank account and leaves her home in her car around noon. At 2:35 p.m., her car arrives at the shopping center parking lot. There she meets someone. A conflict ensues, a struggle. Then she is taken away in another car to an abandoned warehouse, where she is killed. The detective called technical specialist Carol and asked her to review all the surveillance camera footage again, especially in the area around the shopping center. "I've already reviewed those recordings," Carol said, "but I can check the cameras on the neighboring streets. Maybe we missed something." An hour later, she called back with important information. "Detective, I found something interesting. There's a camera at a gas station 2 blocks from the shopping center. On Wednesday, around 3 in the afternoon, 2 cars were spotted there, one after the other." Parrish immediately drove to Carol's office to look at the footage. On the computer screen, he saw Zakara's familiar red Honda driving past the gas station. 30 seconds later, another car followed, a dark blue sedan that appeared to be following the same route. "Can you zoom in on the second car?" the detective asked. Carol worked with the program, and the image became clearer. The license plate was not completely visible, but the make of the car could be identified as a Toyota Camry, about 5 years old. "Can you see the driver?" "Not clearly, but it's definitely a woman. Dark hair, medium build." Parrish asked to run the license plate through the database. The result came back 20 minutes later. The car was registered to Genesis Cole. The detective's heart beat faster. Finally, concrete evidence linking the suspect to the crime scene. Genesis had followed Zakara on the day she disappeared and most likely knew about the meeting at the mall. But before arresting the nurse, Parrish decided to check her alibi more thoroughly. He drove to the hospital and spoke with Genesis's colleagues who had worked the Wednesday shift. A nurse named Charlotte confirmed that Genesis had worked on Wednesday, but added an important detail. She came in fine in the morning, but around noon she asked to leave for personal reasons, Charlotte said. She said she had an urgent meeting related to family issues. She didn't return until around 5 p.m. and looked upset. Did she explain where she had been? No, she just said she was dealing with a difficult situation. I assumed it was related to her family. Genesis's alibi was crumbling. She had enough time to meet with Zakara, take her to the warehouse, and return to work. Parrish decided to check another lead. He drove to the auto repair shop where Azaria Fletcher worked to learn more about the nature of the relationship between Keanu, Zakara, and Genesis. "Azaria, I need your help," the detective said. "Did Genesis Cole ever come to the auto shop?" Fletcher nodded. "A few times. She usually picked up Keanu after work. Pretty girl, but how can I put this? Pushy. What do you mean?" She constantly asked about Keanu's plans, about moving, about money. She seemed very interested in his financial situation. Did she know the exact amount he had saved? Not from me, but Keanu could have told her. He was in love, and men in love sometimes say more than they should. Azaria also remembered an important detail. On Monday, 2 days before Zahara's disappearance, Genesis came to the auto repair shop and talked to Keanu for a long time in his office. The conversation was tense, and raised voices could be heard. What were they arguing about? I don't know for sure, but Genesis looked upset. After she left, Keanu was gloomy for the rest of the day. By evening, Parrish had gathered enough evidence to obtain a search warrant for Genesis Cole's car and apartment. The judge signed the documents without hesitation. The surveillance footage, the false alibi, and the motive constituted a strong case. The search of Genesis's apartment the next morning yielded important results. In her bedroom closet, forensic experts found a pair of jeans with small stains, which a quick analysis confirmed to be blood. In the trunk of her Toyota, they found a wrench with traces of blood and hair. Most importantly, the tires on Genesis's car matched the prints found at the entrance to the abandoned warehouse. When Parrish showed Genesis all the evidence, she initially denied any involvement in the murder. But when the detective laid out the crime scene photos, surveillance footage, and forensic results in front of her, her composure began to slip. "It's not what you think," she said in a trembling voice. "I didn't plan to kill her." "Then tell me what really happened." Genesis lowered her head, and Parrish knew she was ready to confess. The long months of investigation were coming to an end, and the truth was finally coming out. All the evidence pointed to the young nurse as the murderer of Zakara Bolton. The motive, the opportunity, the physical evidence, it all fit together into a picture of a crime committed out of jealousy and greed. All that remained was to hear her full confession and piece together the exact sequence of events on that tragic day. Interrogation room number 3 at the Detroit police station was small and gloomy. Gray walls, a metal table, 3 chairs, and a video camera in the corner under the ceiling. Detective Parrish sat across from Genesis Cole. Between them lay a thick folder containing evidence from the Zahara Bolton murder case. The young nurse looked nothing like she had when they first met at the hospital. Her confidence and composure were gone, her face was pale, and her hands trembled as she adjusted her hair or touched the glass of water on the table. "Miss Cole, you waived your right to an attorney," Parrish began, turning on the tape recorder. "Do you confirm that decision?" "Yes," Genesis said barely audibly. "Okay, let's go over the events of Wednesday, October 12th, again. You claimed that you worked the entire shift at the hospital, but your colleague Charlotte says otherwise." The detective opened a folder and took out the nurse's statement. "She claims that you were absent from noon until 5 in the afternoon. Is that true?" Genesis was silent for a long time, staring at the table. Parrish waited patiently. In 25 years on the job, he had learned not to rush suspects at moments like this. "Yes, it's true," she finally admitted. "I left work. Where did you go?" "I met with Zach." "Whose idea was it to meet?" Genesis looked up, and Parrish saw a mixture of fear and despair in her eyes. "Mine. I called her this morning and told her we needed to talk." "About what?" "About Keanu, about our relationship, about the money." The detective felt the tension in the room rise. This was it. the beginning of the confession he had been waiting for. "Tell me more. What exactly did you say to Zach on the phone?" Genesis took a deep breath, as if preparing to jump off a cliff. "I told her I knew about her plans to divorce Keanu and take all the money, that I wouldn't let her destroy his dreams of a new life." "How did you know about Zahara's plans?" "From Keanu. We had an argument on Monday, and in his anger he told me that Zahara wanted a divorce, that she was planning to take half of everything, including the money he had saved for 8 years. Parrish wrote down every word. The picture was becoming clearer. Genesis had found out about Zahara's plans and decided to act. "What did you offer Zahara during the phone call?" "To meet and discuss the situation like adults. I said I was willing to pay her for the divorce, so she would leave Keanu alone." "And she agreed?" "Yes, we agreed to meet at the Eastland Mall at 2 o'clock in the afternoon." The detective took photos from the surveillance cameras out of his folder. "Here's the recording of you following Zahara's car. Why were you following her if you had already agreed to meet?" Genesis looked at the photos and pressed her lips together. "I arrived early and waited for her in the parking lot. When I saw her car, I followed her to show her where to park." "That's a lie," Parrish said firmly. "The footage shows that you didn't show up until after Zahara was already at the mall. You were following her." There was a long silence. Genesis nervously bit her lip, clearly struggling with herself. "Okay," she finally gave in. "I was following her. I wanted to make sure she came alone, that it wasn't a trap." "A trap? You were afraid of Zahara Bolton?" "I was afraid she would bring Keanu or the police, that she would tell him about our conversation and make me look like a homewrecker." Parrish turned the page in his notebook. Genesis was slowly telling the truth, but so far her version sounded like a story about a failed attempt at negotiation. "Tell me what happened at the mall." "We met in the cafeteria on the second floor. Zahara was cold, haughty. I tried to explain to her that I loved Keanu, that we could be happy together. How did she react?" "She laughed. She said I was a naive fool if I thought Keanu would leave his family for a young mistress, that he'd had plenty like me, and they all thought they were special." Genesis spoke faster and faster, her emotions getting the better of her caution. "I offered her money for the divorce, $5,000, all my savings, but she laughed again and said she was going to get a lot more out of Keanu." "What exactly did she mean?" $47,000 from the safe. She said she already knew the combination and would take it as soon as she decided where to move. That would be her payment for 8 years of living with a man she no longer loved. Parrish felt the puzzle pieces fall into place. Zahara really had planned to take her husband's money, and Genesis had decided to stop her. What happened next? "I tried to talk her out of it, but she stood up and said the conversation was over. She walked toward the exit. I ran after her." "To the parking lot?" "Yes. I caught up with her by the car and tried to talk to her again. I told her I wouldn't let her ruin Keanu's life." The detective took out photos of the interior of Zahara's car. "There are signs of a struggle here. Scratches on the seat, blood. What happened in the car?" Genesis closed her eyes, as if trying not to remember those moments. "Zahara got in the car and locked the doors. I knocked on the window, begging her to listen to me. Then she rolled down the window and said something terrible." "What exactly?" "That Keanu had told her about me, that I was following him around like a dog, that he was laughing at me with his friends, that I was just a fling to him, not a serious relationship." Genesis's voice trembled with anger and pain. "I didn't believe her. I told her she was lying. Then she showed me the messages on her phone." "What messages?" "From Keanu. He wrote to her that he was tired of my demands for a divorce, that I had become clingy, that he planned to end our relationship after moving to Georgia." Parrish understood how those words must have hurt a young woman who was in love and believed in the promises of a married man. "What did you do when you saw those messages?" "I tried to grab her phone. We fought through the open car window. Zahara scratched me with her nails and I pulled her by the arm." "And then?" Genesis fell silent for a long minute. Parrish could see her struggling with herself, deciding whether to continue her confession. "Then I suggested we go somewhere quiet to talk about it without witnesses. I said I was willing to pay more money." "And she agreed?" "Not right away, but I was persistent. In the end, she let me get in the car." The detective took out a map of the city. "Show me where you went." Genesis pointed to an area of abandoned warehouses. There, I knew that place. My friends and I used to go there sometimes in high school. Tell me what happened at the warehouse. Now Genesis spoke barely audibly, as if every word caused her pain. We got out of the car. I tried to change her mind again, offered her $10,000. I said I'd get a loan, but she had to leave Keanu. Did Zahara refuse? Worse. She said she would tell Keanu about our conversation, that she would show him what I was really like, greedy and desperate, that he would realize what a mistake he had made in getting involved with me. Genesis raised her head, and Parrish saw in her eyes the same fury that must have consumed her that day in the warehouse. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let her destroy my last hope for happiness with Keanu. What did you do? I grabbed a wrench from my car. I kept it in the trunk in case of a breakdown. I followed her to the warehouse. The detective felt the atmosphere in the room grow even heavier. They were approaching the climax of the story. I caught up with her in the back of the warehouse. She turned around, saw the wrench in my hands, and realized I was serious. She tried to run away, but tripped over some trash. And then you hit her? Not right away. First, I demanded that she promise to leave Keanu alone, to take her money out of the bank and disappear from our lives. Did she agree? No. She said she would tell Keanu that I tried to bribe her, that he would understand what I was really like. Genesis fell silent, breathing heavily. Parrish waited patiently for her to continue. Then I hit her, once. I didn't mean to kill her. I just wanted her to shut up. But the blow was fatal. Yes, she fell down and didn't move. I tried to revive her, but I realized she was dead. The detective paused in his notes. The basic facts had been established, but important details remained. What did you do after that? I panicked. I didn't know what to do with the body. I decided to leave it in the warehouse and hope that it wouldn't be found soon. What about Zahara's car? I drove it back to the mall. I left it in the parking lot and returned in my car. Why did you throw away Zahara's purse? It had her phone with our text messages. I couldn't let the police find evidence of our meeting. What about the money? Did you look for the money in the Boltons' house? Genesis shook her head. No. After what happened, I couldn't think about money. I just wanted it all to end. Parrish closed his notebook and looked at the young woman across from him. The story had been told in its entirety, from jealousy and despair to the tragic conclusion in the abandoned warehouse. Miss Cole, you do understand that you are confessing to murder? Yes, Genesis replied quietly. I know what I did. I know it was wrong. The detective called for officers to arrest her. As Genesis was being handcuffed, she looked at Parrish one last time. Tell Keanu that I didn't mean to hurt him. I just loved him. After the suspect was taken away, Parrish sat in the empty interrogation room, thinking about what he had heard. It was a classic tragedy: jealousy, deception, unfulfilled hopes. Genesis Cole had killed Zahara Bolton not for money, but because of her love for a man who had used her feelings. That evening, the detective drove to the Bolton home to inform Keanu of the results of the investigation. The man met him at the door, and Parrish immediately knew from his expression that he had already heard about Genesis's arrest on the news. Is it true? Keanu asked in a hoarse voice. Did Genesis kill Zahara? Yes, she confessed everything. Keanu sank into a chair, covering his face with his hands. My God, what have I done? Parrish sat down opposite him and recounted the basic facts of the case without going into the details of the confession. Keanu listened silently, only occasionally flinching at the mention of particularly painful details. So Zahara really wanted a divorce, he said when the detective had finished. Yes, and to take your savings. I didn't even know. I thought we were just going through a rough patch, that things would work out after we moved. Keanu raised his head, and Parrish saw boundless pain in his eyes. I've lost everything, detective. A wife who, it turns out, I hadn't loved for a long time, money I'd been saving for 8 years, a woman who I thought loved me, and most importantly, I've lost myself. Mr. Bolton, you're not to blame for what happened. I am. If I hadn't cheated on my wife, if I hadn't told Genesis about our problems, Zahara would be alive. Parrish said nothing. In cases like this, words of comfort sounded hollow. Keanu Bolton was indeed to blame, Not for the murder, but for the chain of events that led to it. The detective stood up, ready to leave. The case was closed, the killer found and arrested, but he felt no victory, only fatigue and regret for 3 broken lives. "What will happen to Genesis now?" Keanu asked. "Court. Most likely 20 years in prison for second-degree murder." Keanu nodded, as if accepting the sentence for himself as well. The man who had dreamed of a new life in Georgia was left with a ruined house in Detroit, no money, no future, and no illusions. Parrish stepped out into the cool October night. Rain began to fall again, turning the streets into shiny rivers of asphalt. Somewhere in the city, Genesis Cole sat in a cell, realizing that her life was over at the age of 28. And Keanu Bolton was left alone in an empty house where every object reminded him of lost happiness. The story ended as many criminal cases end, with no winners, only victims and ruined lives.